You're tuning into the Active Mom Podcast with physical therapist Dr. Carrie Pagliano, a real mom's guide to all things postpartum return to workouts after baby. If you're a postpartum mom, coach, trainer, or physical therapist looking for answers on how to get back to running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, you name it, without the fear of pelvic floor issues or doing something wrong, this is the podcast for you. Let's start the show. All right, welcome to the 100th episode of the Active Mom Postpartum Podcast. Today's a little weird because it's just me. In those 100 episodes, I have not done a solo episode once. It's all been guests. So this is going to be new for me. Hopefully, I'll figure out how to talk to myself, and hopefully, you guys will enjoy it. Before we get started today, those of you that are watching on YouTube, I wanted to give a little behind the scenes. So this is my office where I film, so you can kind of get a sense of, air conditioner, treatment table, all that kind of stuff. But I always kind of need to clear things out. So over my shoulder, I need to clear out the lube. So how many podcasts do you listen to that they have to clear out the lube and the rubber gloves in the background? So let me do that real quick. All right, lube is cleared. All good to go. So yeah, the podcast, we've been doing this for, about 2 years now. And first, before I even get started, this would not even happen without Lara Costa, who is, she's my podcast editor. She helps me out with a bunch of stuff. We've been working together for a couple of years. She is just the bomb and listens to every single word of these episodes. And so thank you, Laura, for being amazing at this and constantly listening to my voice. And then Maria Alcock, who she does my website and some of my photography and things like that. And I've known Maria since before the podcast existed. We met through, mom CrossFit kinds of things. And she had the Engine Mom podcast. And so she was a huge inspiration. So this would not exist without these two amazing mothers. So thank you to both of you. All right. So I thought I would start the 100th episode, which is kind of insane when you think about it, talking about kind of what my thoughts are on the current state of pelvic floor PT. Those of you that, if this is your first episode and you're like, who is this chick? I've been PT, I think it'll be 25 years this year. And then I've been a pelvic floor PT, probably 24 of those. It was not my plan to get into pelvic floor PT. I got into it because when I graduated in 1999, there were no jobs because of managed care. Thank you very much. There were 6 of us in my class of 60 that had jobs. And my first job was in home care in North and West Philadelphia. Come a long way since then. I came to DC in 2001 to take a job to do women's health because there wasn't men's health at the time. Didn't realize that would kind of become my life's work. I kind of took it to get out of upstate New York, where I'm from. And had a great, amazing mentor, Karen Liberie, who tolerated like young 20-something me. Somehow, lo and behold, fast forward 20 some odd years, we're sitting here, and it's probably the coolest thing in PT that you can do because we literally have no limits. We deal with every system in the body. We deal with every type of human on the planet. And so in that respect, it's fun because you're learning something new every day. And because in research, women have been historically left behind, not only as researchers, but to be included in research methodology and understanding of what makes us unique has been left behind. We're learning new stuff every day. So I literally, if I have clients that I saw 5 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever, I love when they come in because I'm like, hey, when's the last time you were in? How many kids did I have? That kind of thing. And this is what we're doing now that's different. And so it's definitely not at all boring. You get to know a little bit about a lot of things, and it's brought me into contact with some really cool people. So the state of pelvic floor physical therapy, as I see it, this is my opinion. I'm not representing anyone or anything. I think there's some good stuff. When I moved here in 2001, there was maybe a dozen of us in the DC area. We all knew each other. I think we even had an in-person journal club or something like that. Now I couldn't begin to tell you who all the people are who are going into pelvic floor PT in the DC Maryland, Virginia metro area. There's just so many. A lot of students are going straight into pelvic floor PT. I have thoughts about that. And I have never seen so many moms who are physical therapists not only look and turn to pelvic floor PT kind of as a career change within PT and embrace it, but also go out on their own and become private practitioners, mompreneurs, that sort of thing. And really, that's the root of our history. The Academy of Pelvic Health Physical Therapy is we are the same age. We are 47. Used to be known as, I think it was the OBGYN section, and then it was the women's health section. And then I joke that my third child was getting the name changed to the Academy of Pelvic Health PT when I was vice president and president. We've come so far, but that organization started because you had moms who were PTs who were having problems and there was nobody to address it. And so just like moms do, nobody else is going to fix it. We'll fix it. So it's just so cool to see that aspect of our field grow. I think the other thing that's super cool, and this is, the good and bad news about social media is so many more people are having these conversations, and it's not just us. I think pelvic floor PTs have done a really good job of taking a potentially awkward subject and making it entertaining and making it approachable and making it a conversation worthy of sharing on social media, regardless of age and stage in life. Some people really take it to some extents that I probably, a little out there, but hey, there's an audience for everybody. What I do appreciate though is it makes our profession approachable. We have a tendency to think a lot of ourselves and get a little too medical and a little less approachable sometimes. And so I think us sharing information on social media has made our field much more approachable. And, I think more people are aware of us, which is fantastic. And I think also too the benefits, the good news, I joke that the good news about the pandemic was two things. One, telehealth and, people realizing that they can get care virtually online, sharing information, that sort of thing, and delivery margaritas. I don't know if the delivery margaritas are still happening, but I think people understanding that your access to care or your availability of information shouldn't be limited by your zip code. And that's one of the biggest social determinants of health is your zip code. And I grew up in a really rural area in upstate New York. The largest major hospital was 70 miles away. And so, if basically my deal is like, if you've got internet, we can get you some information. And I have been, I think, very determined to make sure I share as much information as possible, understanding that not everybody has access. Here in DC, you can kind of find a specialist for anything. I understand that there's parts of the world, understanding that that's who we're speaking to, that either you don't have access for a variety of resource reasons, or there aren't people there that, standard of practice is a little bit different. And so it shouldn't necessarily matter where you are in the world. I think it's important to share updated information. And as a result of that, I think we have more educated consumers. We have more educated people to ask better questions of their providers, demand more, and that's where we're going to get change. And I think that's across the board in perinatal health, where we're not just blindly accepting what somebody tells us because that happens to be the person who's in our geography or in our circles or that sort of thing. So empowering women to question their providers, I think, is freaking amazing. And then be armed with that information to be able to advocate for themselves. So I think those are some of the good things. The other thing I do see, and I hope we see more of it, is more specialization within the specialty of pelvic health. So again, when I first started, it was women's health. That was it. Now, obviously, we've got men's, women's, trans health, kids, kind of all the things. But even within women's now, pelvic pain and perinatal, and now there's a huge boom in around perimenopausal and menopausal health. I got kind of plunged into that this year with my personal situation. It's so funny. I remember I took my women's health board certification. I can't tell you whatever the first year was. It might have been '09 or something. I don't know. Anyway, point being, I remember there was a menopause section. I remember thinking it was so stupid because what could we possibly do as pelvic floor physical therapists to impact menopause? Because it was just a hormone thing. Hormones change, blah, blah, that's it. Maybe you get frozen shoulder. Yeah, I was such an idiot back then. There's so much we can do, and even just having those conversations and advocating, for our clients to find providers. I had a colleague of mine who's a GYN, and she reached back out to me. She's like, "Hey, I see you're posting about this more. Please let people know that I'm an option for them." So again, like I think it's so important to, even if I can't prescribe hormones, to at least be like, "Hey, these are the questions you need to be asking," or other conversations that I'm having are just having differential diagnosis conversations. I had one the other day where I kid you not, we were trying to differentially diagnose mom life, which is like, you know, crazy, especially the last 5 years, with a couple of kids, with perimenopause, with post viral complications after an illness. And then I dare say, sometimes in the back of my head, I'm also thinking about energy deficiency in kind of low estrogen situations. So basically, that can be postpartum, that can also be perimenopause. So in that conversation, it's like, okay, how do we tease these things out? Because we're all gaslighting ourselves that, we're tired, we're exhausted. There's just a lot of things going on. A lot of kids are sick. You're sick all the time. Like this is different than it was 5 years ago. How do we, one, find somebody to listen to us, but two, how do we figure out who to talk to? And this particular person, we're like, all right, fatigue, brain fog, all of that. That could be all of these things except for energy deficiency. Okay, well, maybe it could be, but generally that's probably not it. Okay, you're having some insomnia, no period changes. Okay, that probably isn't peri, and you're having regular periods. Let's put that one on the shelf. But with this particular person, we're literally like, okay, this started. We have a start point, and this was, um, 5 weeks after a viral infection or just a illness of unspecified origin. We'll put it that way because nobody knows anymore. And tachycardia at rest. And I was like, oh, that's post viral. So if we find these other kind of little details, then we can kind of narrow it down to what it is. But it's really easy these days to be like, I feel like shit. Is this just what being in my late 30s, early 40s, late 40s feels like? So these are the conversations that we're having, because in the 7 minutes that you're sitting there with your primary care doctor, your OBGYN, like they're not sitting down walking through that stuff with you. And so I do think that we're finding our space and our places for a subspecialty within pelvic floor PT. I do know a lot of PTs that, go and work in large health systems or work for larger corporate practices or things like that. You kind of just get what comes through the door, and you have your basic, level 1, level 2, and it is what it is. But then there's those of us that are, subspecializing, in working with weightlifters or ultra runners or, athletes or perimenopause or, those sorts of things, or, pelvic pain after kids, like endometriosis, bladder pain, like those sorts of things. I love that there's more subspecialty that's defining itself. And again, maybe that's happening because there are, more private practices popping up, and more kind of niches and that sort of thing. But I love that. I want to see more of it. All right, bad things in the state of pelvic floor PT. It's kind of the pendulum. It's like we didn't have a lot of people in this space, and now it's like super cool. And again, it always kind of cracks me up that students in PT programs are like, "Yeah, I want to do pelvic floor PT." I was like, I don't ever remember feeling that way. And I don't know, maybe we just made it look cool. I don't know, or maybe it's, it's just so much more than it was when we were looking at it. Cause, when I was, first starting, basically it's like, you've got Kegels, you've got some stretches, I've got biofeedback. That's kind of it. So it was kind of, I hated it at first, I'll be honest with you, until I did the mashup with orthopedics. It was really boring to me. So yeah, I almost didn't stick with it because I thought it was stupid. They would literally be like, all right, put your finger for a pelvic pain, high tone. We recognize that as high tone now. Be like, all right, put your finger there on a tender point, leave it there for 90 seconds, and then poke it again and see if it feels better. And of course it wouldn't, because that's not how it works. But I was like, this is freaking boring. And all we were taught to do is internal as well. There was not this, oh, look at external stuff and look at internal. It was, and then everything was stretching, no strengthening. Like it was boring and I hated it. And it wasn't until I started doing more orthopedics, in conjunction and then realized, wow, okay, there's some mashups to be happening. And I had a great sports ortho PT I worked with, Scott Epsley, stupid smart, and he believed in me and was like, "Hey, we think a lot alike." And I was like, "Okay, let's smash this shit up." And I haven't looked back since. So the good news is, yes, we have more people excited about being in pelvic floor PT. The bad news is they go straight there and don't have a background in other things. Like I credit so much of how I look at pelvic floor issues now because I have a background in orthopedics, because, I work with high level athletes. Some of my other favorite pelvic PTs, like Sarah Tanzer, she has a background in neuro. Like having a background in other specialties allows us to look at this through a different lens and consider other things. And I do think that it's to your detriment if you go straight into pelvic floor PT and think that just a level one or a level two class is like, yeah, this is all it is. Because there's so much integration that has to occur in understanding and kind of just pulling it together, big picture. So I hope that, that gets a little bit better. I think there's also a lot of non PTs trying to jump into the space. Like, let's just be honest, somebody with a big social media following is, they get pregnant and then all of a sudden before you know it, they're, selling a pregnancy program. My pet peeve is when you're selling that pregnancy program before you've had the kid, because like, come on, like there's no proof of validity there. Like, we don't know how this is all going to turn out. We're selling the postpartum program before you're postpartum. Like, again, my pet peeves there. Or people just selling pregnancy and postpartum programs because it's cool. And I see that starting to happen in perimenopause and menopause as well. And I am bound and determined that this time the women that went through the dumpster fire that was pregnancy and postpartum, kind of my vintage and before, that we don't have the same dumpster fire that we have to fight again in perimenopause and menopause. So yeah, a lot of people that are not experienced don't know what the hell they're talking about putting stuff out. I also think it's really hard. Again, good news, bad news about social media. Like you're putting out marketing hooks. So understanding that I have a small business, I understand marketing. Like when you're putting up a post, when you're putting up a reel, our job is to get your attention. And that might be to say something off the wall that isn't exactly medically true. But does that matter? Because I got your attention. And if I want you to buy something or I want you to, come get something from me, I need your attention first. And so I think, consumers understanding the difference between good medical advice and people that have good vetted evidence informed information versus people with a good marketing hook. And the young ones are savvy now, like the ones with the big old, accounts and the followers and that sort of thing. Like they're savvy on the hook. That doesn't necessarily mean or not mean that that's the best source of information. So I think getting the understanding of consumers that's the case. Other things that I think are not great, also related to the social media aspect, is there's a ton of free information out there. Everybody's got a free handout or this or that. And so with that, you have a lot of people that kind of suffer what I call the DIY fallout. Yeah, the answer is out there, absolutely. But do you know how to put it together? Like, do you know what pieces of free information you would have to put together in what order in your particular scenario to get the outcome that you're looking for in the time that you would prefer? And the answer is no. And that's where I think respecting that this is a field with expertise. I put free information out to get people thinking, to help them advocate. I always will help people find resources close to them as much as I can, or online or things like that. If it was so easy to DIY, I wouldn't have a job for 25 years. And I think I had somebody reach out the other day and was basically, and it was a PT trying to understand kind of pelvic floor PT. And it kind of, it pissed me off because he oversimplified it. And he was like, oh, well, basically the research, you guys stick your fingers in there and you see a squeeze, relax, endurance, quick flicks, and then that's it. Right. And he's like, and then he mentioned, kind of, couldn't we just replace all that with all these devices that are out there, especially because we don't want to increase abuse and, Larry Nasser. And I was like, okay, first of all, I've been at this 25 years. please, don't, you barely scrape the surface. Trauma informed care, Larry Nassar was not doing pelvic floor PT. Um, the fallout from Larry Nassar, I mean, like we could go down some serious rabbit holes, but there's so much that goes into, I think, a good pelvic floor assessment that goes so far beyond. And I think that's the biggest change in what I've learned in 25 years is that I am far more than my examining finger. The longer I've been at this, the less internal I do because the more I actually spend on subjective and trying to understand and listen because your patient has the answer. It's up to you to figure out what it is and pull together a framework and a hypothesis to be like, hey, this is what I think is going on. This is how I can test it. And this is how we're going to move this on forward. And there's so many systems involved that are just literally beyond somebody squeezing around my finger. It's not even funny. And I literally have to have a whole episode to talk about it. But it was funny. I was literally like violently, passionately like, you don't know what the frick you're talking about. And I say that not because this is just my profession. And I've never been a Kool-Aid person, so it's not like, "Oh, yeah, you're rah-rah PT," like, there's more people rah-rah than me, but because I've had my own pelvic floor issues, and have I've had a birth that didn't go the way I thought it would, and I literally had to sit there and decide if everything that I had been taught was bullshit or not. And if it was, that's it. Guess what? You're not gonna run, you're not gonna do anything. And I literally had to turn on what I thought my job was and challenge it in order to make sure that I could continue to be the active person that I envisioned myself to be as a mom. And I think when you go through shit like that and you have a coming to Jesus about yourself and your future and how you envision yourself, and it just so happens to mash up with your career, you tend to be a little passionate about it. So I get a little feisty when I have people that don't understand that. And again, not to put down people that are in pelvic PT and haven't gone through those things. I hope that you don't have to, but there's something to be said for being in a space and experiencing that and being able to empathize with your clients in a similar way to be like, I didn't understand CrossFit until I became, a CrossFitter. So not exactly the same as childbirth, but you get where I'm going with that. So um, anyway, that's kind of the DIY fallout failure situation where I do think it's so important that to respect that so much time and effort and understanding and research and trying to understand and collaborate with other areas has gone into a lot of the work that we do. And we might make it look simple, but there's a shitload of thought behind that. Last thing, and I think it's just overarching, not specific to pelvic floor PT, but probably just to maternal perinatal health, is it freaking sucks that we're sitting here in 2024 and maternal mortality is still an issue. Like, what the hell? Like, I don't even understand that. I read something the other day. I think it was in Texas. A mom gave birth, went home. Um, she died. I think her baby died of dehydration, and her two kids were found like dehydrated. I was like, this is 2024 and this stuff is still happening. So that's why I think the more touch points that people have beyond their primary, care provider, beyond their GYN, that's where I think we can play a role is if, we can keep contact with the people that need us the most. And we can advocate for them because this shit shouldn't be happening. It's kind of ridiculous. So, all right. So that's the state of pelvic floor PT. Biggest impact of the last like 5 years. I think that there's a couple things that really stick out for me. We're what are we 4 years out from the beginning of the pandemic. I think it was Friday, March 13th, 2020. It was, I think, Friday the 13th. And I think that was the last day my kids went to school for like, I don't know, 300 some odd days. That first 4 to 6 months, I think was impactful to me in a bunch of ways. One, that I can do my job this way. I can do it with my hands tied behind my back and still be able to impact people. And I think the evidence for that was in those first months. First, I did just check-ins to make sure my patients were okay. And of course, everybody's symptoms, whether it was leakage, prolapse, pain, whatever, everybody was off the hook because we were all in fight or flight, including myself. Just starting with really basic things like being aware of your breath, being aware of tension in your body, and not trying to fix it or not trying to go to some place of perfection. Noticing it, trying to make a little change, let it go a little bit, and then move on. And it's basically noting as a mindfulness technique. I've studied mindfulness for probably about 15 years, before I had kids, and it was just something that was very simple, actionable, and added up. And it was something that we could do in that time. And I could not believe how many clients that I had that just tried that one thing and then came back and said, "Oh my gosh, you know what? I'm holding my breath all the time," or you know what, I just let go a little bit and I'm feeling so much better. And granted, no one should have to go through, months like that and experience that in order to understand this concept. But it couldn't have been more crystal clear that I can give somebody the most perfect, treatment exercise program that I've created in the world. But if we don't look at the context that someone's in, if we don't consider the whole person, if we don't consider physiological implications of life, we are missing the boat. And I hate, or don't care for, thank you, however you want to put that, um, when PTs make clients or patients feel guilty because they didn't get to their exercises or they keep stacking the list. I always refer to the CVS length receipt list of exercises. Like that sucks. And then moms just give themselves a guilt trip. And my mantra is, how little do you need to do so no one dies? Like, what can we do to get the most impact so people notice change, which will give us buy-in, which will then get you to your goal the fastest? And little things like that, that are doable and actionable, and you notice a difference. And that's why you're going to stick with it, because you notice a difference. That's where we need to have more emphasis in our care. And you don't have to spend years on it. But that's someplace that has not failed me in the last several years. And I don't know that just being aware of breath and tension and context. And also, don't start with the hardest context first. Like, don't try and work on your anxiety and your breathing strategies and tension when you're on the phone with your parents talking about the holidays and kids and or whatever the hard part is, the work conversation or whatever, like, don't do that. And then the other thing I love talking about there is, and if you haven't listened to it, we did, our season 1 finale with James Clear, Atomic Habits. I love habit stacking and be like, all right, my favorite one recently is, women who are on Zoom calls all day still, is that they need that external cue to remind them to like pay attention to their breath and tension. I was like, at the beginning of every meeting, Zoom call, people are like, "Oh, hey, everybody, come on in. Let's just wait a few minutes for everybody to hop on the call." My husband's in consulting, so I hear that at home all the time, and I'm like, "Hey, that's a great cue to remind you to take a breath." So that one and getting in your car and turning on the key, those are my faves. So understanding of kind of the big impact of those sorts of things. And I think that also um, keyed into understanding how much more high tone or overactivity that we're actually dealing with. So back when I first started, it was like, okay, anything related to pregnancy, postpartum, it's underactivity, you're doing Kegels. If it's pain, we need to do relaxation. Now I think there's so much that we're understanding. I think the last 5 to 8 years, really wrapping our head around stress incontinence and high tone. And again, the research is coming, and I think, is this high tone? Like, what the heck are we actually feeling here? What is was? And I think we're still working on that explanation of what it is and why. But I think the awareness that high tone can play a role in pelvic organ prolapse symptoms. And I think where that came together for me is for years having clients that you examine them in every single position and you barely see any sign of prolapse, but they feel it all the time. And, they're dismissed by their providers. But then you've got that patient that comes in, the only reason why they're there is because they stuff something in all the time, but they don't have any symptoms. Like, how can these two realities exist? And I think having a background in pelvic pain and chronic pelvic pain and understanding kind of hypersensitivity and awareness and those sorts of things and overlaying that with high tone, I think there is definitely more that we need to understand about why those clients that really don't look like they have any appreciable um, pelvic organ prolapse are having these sensations of a tampon falling out or heaviness or pressure or things like that. So I think even just grasping that concept and accepting it as a possibility has been a big change in the last few years. And I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing where that goes. This idea that I saw a post yesterday. Somebody's like, "Oh, I don't have to have pelvic floor surgery because my prolapse grade changed from a 2 to a 1, and now I don't feel anything." I'm like, I don't know that it actually changed stages, but I do think you were able to change the sensitivity of whatever's going on there and build strength and that kind of stuff too. So I do think there's a lot of semantics that we still need to unpack, but I do believe that we can continue to reduce um, likelihood of having to go for surgery for prolapse or symptoms or things like that. I think we can make a much bigger impact on symptoms than we might have previously thought in a conservative way. So yeah, prolapse management, I think that that's been such a big difference. And then the last one, the biggest game changer for me just in this last year, um, huge thank you to Celeste Goodson. She goes by Recore Fitness. She put out a paper, I think it was it was either December 22 or January 23, looking at running drills and putting them in order from least vertical impact force to most vertical impact force. And what caught me right off the top was two things. One is that those of us with a history of track and field and running, and we had even CrossFit, like a lot of the stupid drills, high knees and kick butts and karaoke and that kind of stuff, are really on the higher end of vertical impact force. And so the basic things that even if you don't have that background, you're starting really high and understanding that what if we, even with the return to run readiness screen, hopping in place, single leg, double leg, that's definitely a little bit higher up in this range that Celeste Group was able to demonstrate. It's like, what if we back up the truck a little bit and start much smaller with lower vertical impact force? Will that make a difference? And I have had the most fun this year playing with that. Um, and playing with, okay, we'll try this, but try it a little bit slower. Just do a couple hops and then we'll build it up to time limits and just kind of playing with that progression a little bit more. And we've made some huge gains with that. And I do think, and again, kind of with one foot in the perimenopause space where there's a lot of voices talking about, hey, we need to get hit in, we need to be doing plyometrics. Like, I think those are conversations we need to be having much sooner. Again, I could have a whole podcast about this, but I think we need to make sure that our postpartum moms, those exercise programs, it needs to be more than core. It needs to be more than glutes. We need to start adding impact in because I don't know a single mom who isn't going to, at some point in time, run across a playground to catch a runaway kid and not freak out if they have leakage or things like that. So everybody's a runner in my book, especially if you have little ones. So for me, that's probably the biggest impact in the last 5 years and especially the last year. All right. Top 5 podcast guests. So I kind of cheated on this because it was like 4 and then my fifth one was like a whole bunch of people. All right. So I think purely from a straightforward no stuff kind of standpoint, like PT standpoint, my two favorite, sorry, I'm cheating on myself here. Allison Grimaldi, she was our top episode of season 2. She's a hip therapist in hip physio in Australia. I've known about Allison long time ago. Like I said, my colleague Scott Epsley, he had introduced me to her concepts and stuff, and she's just freaking amazing. So smart. And I love it when people who know really good ortho are willing to do the mashup with the pelvic floor and they see that connection. And that I think that's far more common now than it was definitely 10 years ago, definitely 15 years ago. So it's really cool that that's just kind of normal now. The other person I'm thinking of, Rich Willie, he was in our top 5 for, season 1. He's running PT out of Montana, stupid smart, and really just laid down some nice basic, running myths that I think that stuff gets locked into running land and really needs to be extrapolated over into pelvic floor PT or PTs that do work with runners in the pelvic floor because and again, this is where I hope there's more specialization is if you are working with runners and you don't know anything about running, you need to find a PT that does running or you need to learn about it yourself. And so it was just nice for him to kind of bust some of those myths that I think that get carried through for people who don't necessarily know any better. So those are my two favorite just straightforward PT guests. James Clear was awesome. He was our season finale for season 1. James wrote the book Atomic Habits, and Shefali Christopher knew him, connected me to him. When I read his book, I read it as a parenting book. I did not read it as a business book. I'm like, oh my God, habit stacking. That's totally like Mom 101. And so he wrote it before he had kids, and it was such a fun conversation because he had just had a second kid when we did the interview. And then I was like, dude, you need to go back and write the parent version. It's really not going to be that much different. But if you market it as a parent version, you're going to make a lot of money. But I just love that, a couple years later, since he's written it, like it's still a top seller. I think people really do connect with that. And I do think um, as PTs, and this is a lesson I didn't learn in PT school. This is a lesson I learned as a mom is we won't get anywhere unless we're able to be consistent. And again, I got enough times that I guilt myself during the day. I don't need my PT doing it to me. But if we can help people figure out how to integrate things into their day so that they can be consistent, that makes it easier for us to see if something's going to be helpful or not. And people feel better about themselves when they can be consistent. They're able to progress, but you can't just be like, all right, do this and not be like, all right, I know you have a bunch of kids, a job, and all this other stuff. Where the hell are you going to put that? And the conversation doesn't have to be long, but you got to help them out. But that, again, I learned that from being a mom. I didn't learn that from being a PT, but I do think that's one of the things that that perspective can be incredibly helpful. Some other interviews I love. Sarah Tanza, she goes by Pelvic Potential. Just love her. We have never, so many of my guests we've never met in person. And Sarah, she's in California. She's pelvic floor PT, neuro background, but also works with runners. She's working with Steph Bruce. Hopefully we're going to get them coming on this year. Just stupid smart and just somebody I would just love to hang out with because her brain is kind of like mine where we're like, well, what about this? And what about this? And we just had so much fun on that podcast. And it was kind of in the middle of lockdown too. And so it was just cool to talk to somebody and just get into like professional fun stuff. And then another one was our Swim Moms podcast in season 2. I'm lucky enough in my life as a mom, my both my kids do summer swim, which is a whole culture. And there's a handful of moms that our daughters swim together, and our kids are in the same kind of age group. And we all find a way to get our workouts in. And it was just fun to bring a couple of them on and be like, hey, you weren't necessarily an exerciser before. This is how you're finding it now. And, there's ways to do this. So that was a great conversation. And then some of the guests has been on a couple of times. This is my cheater one because it's really not one person. It's like 4. Or just people I love to talk to, and we can just shoot the shit anytime and talk about anything. And they're just really smart people and just good people. And people I DM a lot. My favorite friends are people that don't live near me. I can't be the only one. Some of my OGs, Brianna Battles, Lisa Ryan, Celeste Goodson, Christina Previtt, just really, really smart people that I respect a lot and have been just putting good stuff out into the universe. And, it's always fun and a privilege and a pleasure to be able to have conversations with people that I know have done the work to vet information and have gone through the shit themselves and taken that and turned it around to try and help other people. So those are my favorite guests. I know it wasn't exactly 5, but there you go. I think the next thing I had here is I reached out and I said, "Hey, what questions do you guys have? Can I ever get back to heavy Olympic lifts after stage 1, 2 prolapse diagnosis?" Oh my god, 100% yes. And I think the first step is, 1, knowing that that's a possibility. Um, and because I think there's still so much conflicting information. It depends on where you are in the world, the information and what people are telling you. And then it also, and again, having gone through this and having my own issues with prolapse, like you really start to question, especially if you're feeling it all the time, especially if it's early on. So the advice I have for that is the earlier you can get with somebody who is lifting informed and pelvic floor informed, and the mashup of those two is best. That's probably best case scenario, because you do have to go back. And this is my whole thing. It's like, why are you having those symptoms? Um, you know, is it, high tone? Is it lack of pressure control? Is it, how you're lifting? Like, do we just need to build endurance? So like there's a million and one reasons you and I can have the exact same symptoms, but we can have completely different reasons why we got there. So some of my favorite voices in lifting with prolapse. I just mentioned Christina Previtt. She also has the handle Barbell Mamas. Lots of good information there. She talks a lot about that. I talk quite a bit as well, but again, it's finding somebody who's going to help you navigate that piece of it. I think Bree Battles talks a lot about it as well. Just there's ways to navigate these things in the barbell space. So the short answer is yes. And the next step is, let's find voices that you can start to kind of listen to and resonate with, to figure out how to best to go forward, and finding resources to help you so that you're not going to DIY this one alone, and go back to what I mentioned earlier, where you have the DIY failure fallout. So I don't want people to try and navigate this, because it can get really complex and there can be a lot of steps to it when it's done intentionally and correctly. But it also can be incredibly easy for those of us to help you navigate that we've done this a million times before. It's not our first rodeo. So next question. Okay, this one's I kind of put the patient questions first, and then I do the other stuff later. Current evidence exercising in supine in pregnancy. This one, I don't know that there is. I'll be honest with you. I will give you my 2 cents. Obviously, don't take this as medical information, advice, or specific to you. Entertainment purposes only. That's the usual disclaimer. Um, Having been pregnant 3 times, having woken up flat on my back at 41 and a half weeks with both kids, happy as a clam because I could breathe. Um, if it's something's going on, most of the time you're going to feel it. If you're exercising on your back, you're not going to want to be there. You're going to be, and something's wrong. Something's going to feel off. You're not going to feel lightheaded. You're going to be. The idea is that the weight of the baby would compress a major blood vessel. Um, you're not going to feel good in that position. And that's where just pop it in an incline. And if you're that worried about it, like if the stress of the whole, oh my God, I'm flat on my back, if that's really driving you crazy, just get on an incline and don't worry about it. But it's right up there with like stupid, old wives' tales that we continue to tell people. Like I had a friend in PT school that she was Greek, and she's like, you can't tell a Greek woman that she can't have feta. Like, don't eat nasty deli meat or nasty sushi anyway. Definitely don't eat it in pregnancy. Like, don't do stupid things. Okay. So, the short answer to that one is, who's going to do the study that says if I lay on my back, it's going to hurt my baby? Like, no one's ever going to do that study. So there's not going to be a paper on that anytime soon. And I don't know that it's a great question anyway, because, it's going to be dependent on so many different variables. And we do such a shitty job at actually getting pregnancy related research anyway, because most of it has to be, retrospective. But short answer is, if you're that freaked out, get on an incline. But really, like, if you're not feeling great, change position. That's my 2 cents. How did you get into running and pelvic floor PT? Running. I've been running. If you ask my mom, I've probably been running since I was a kid. Um, the way the story is told is, this is always something I've enjoyed. Apparently, I used to run to impress my grandparents. I was not fast. This is a good story. I was so freaking slow in like, you know, 7th and 8th grade. My poor parents, they would like come to my track meets and my cross country meets, and I'm just kind of like plodding along with a big old smile on my face and these big Coke bottle glasses and braces. And they're probably just like, "Oh my god, like this poor girl is like dead last." And I was, don't get me wrong. And then I think it was my last cross country meet in 8th grade. It was a home meet. I think we did a little over a mile or something like that. For some reason, I decided, oh, well, let me see if I can do this. And I led like most of the race. And then I think I finished second at the end. I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's something here. And I was very, very fortunate. I had some great cross country coaches. And my first high school, my second high school I transferred to in 10th grade. My coach was my cross country coach and my Nordic ski coach. I can't ever tell him how much working with him meant to me. He was so freaking forward thinking. Like we were doing plyometrics in 1993. We were doing visualization of races on the floor of libraries in 1992. Like just things that like that's a long time ago in case those of you weren't doing the math. So just super, super lucky to be surrounded with some awesome coaches that were really forward thinking and always supportive of the groups of girls that they were entrusted with. Both my track coaches, both schools were football coaches, so I think they were just picking up a check. Why you would put pubescent teenage girls with a high school football coach, I will never know. But anyway, always adored running. I got to college and stopped for a little bit and definitely gained the freshman 15 because I didn't have to be at practice anymore. And I think that's really where, maybe it was like end of first year, beginning of second year, I started to go run. And you have to be very conscious about when you run and where you run in West Philadelphia. I went to Oh god, at the time, it was Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and Science, renamed University of Sciences in Philadelphia and recently purchased by, St. Joe's? I don't know. They keep changing the name. So anyway, West Philadelphia. And so I that's kinda where I found it again, and I loved it, and that was kind of my stress relief and would do some 5Ks and things like that, and, did my first marathon in, '04. And then had hip FAI surgery a couple years later, and that really kinda slowed things down. And then a couple years later after that, got pregnant with, my oldest, and, there's 2.5 years, between our kids, and then I would really say I have been able to really get back into it the last several years because, the kid schedule allows, nobody's up at 0 dark 30 and requires me to be there with them in the morning. I can get out and about and come back from a run before they are up. Been able to do some 5Ks with the kids and that kind of stuff. So for me, it's been a lifelong thing. I think really mashing it up with running I'm sorry, mashing up, running with my work as a pelvic floor PT. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. But I think, I'm lucky enough to live in Arlington County, Virginia. We are like second year running, most active city in the country. Everybody runs here. We got a lot of trails. And so I think there's just been a need. And then also, I started doing CrossFit when my daughter was 3, so that was 2016. Um, that was a game changer for me too because adding load to my workouts allowed me to run with less pain. And I think that's also when I was able to start to run more and just open up a whole new world of, hey, we need to cross train um, to be able to have, less injury and better performance. And my hip just plain felt better. And so that opening up that whole world of CrossFit and HIIT and kind of weight training and stuff was very impactful for me. Um, and then recently, these last couple of years, working with a run coach has been really fun too to kind of understand the training aspect of stuff. And now, as we look forward into perimenopause and menopause, the nice thing is like all the recommendations are like, hey, you should be doing HIIT, you should be doing strength training and plyometrics. I'm like, check, check, check. And so for once, I did the work first and didn't have to do the catch up. So And again, it's super cool to be able to take what I do for fun, and that's like my job. So work, like, it doesn't stop for me because that's also my hobby, which I guess that's the dream, right? But no, that was not the plan. That was definitely not the plan. Different question altogether. Biggest social media pet peeve. I think my biggest social media pet peeve, and some of you will not find this surprising, is trying to engage with another account and doing it in a respectful way, and they dismiss you or shut you down, or I'm right, or they won't even engage in that, and then they just block you. Or they double down on whatever they said that was bullshit anyway. So my whole thing is, I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to have a conversation. I'm happy to try and understand things from your perspective. Um, I understand that in a post, nuances can be missed. I get that. I think posts are opportunities to have bigger conversations and establish relationships and um, kind of think about things in a different way and see things from other people's point of views. But when you try and engage with an account to have those conversations and they're more concerned about their brand or doubling down on what is incorrect and not being willing to talk about nuances and, well, what about this and that sort of thing, and understanding that not everybody is going to respond to the same advice. Like that's a pet peeve of mine. I have a theory. I've shared this a lot. Like, a third of the people, it doesn't matter what you have them do, they're going to be fine. A third of the people will respond well to basic instruction. That's, I think, the theory of group instruction. They're gonna be fine. And then you're gonna have a third of people that really do need that like specific training. And I think that that's where pelvic floor PTs, that's where we really shine. And even great pregnancy postpartum, athleticism coaches and that sort of thing. Um, so I don't feel like I need to have the corner market on pelvic floor PT. Like, we all can own that. And some people don't feel that way. Like, I get shit sometimes because a lot of people are like, everybody should see a pelvic floor PT. I'm like, I disagree as a pelvic floor PT. Um, but I do think we need to have more people in that space that can speak to pelvic floor issues in an informed way. Because again, I grew up in a rural area. We didn't have people. I think it was Haley Shevner years ago. She's like, well, what about people that can't, either they can't come see you or they've been to several pelvic floor PTs and they're not better. Does that mean that they're screwed for life? And I'm like, valid point. So I think having access and information from an informed provider, and also knowing where pelvic floor specialists can play a huge role, I think is incredibly important. So um, I have no issues with people sharing information about the pelvic floor who are not pelvic floor PTs. I do have issues with people who claim to be experts because they took a weekend course, or they're pregnant, or just had a baby and they have a huge following and all of a sudden they know all the things. So yeah, those are just a few. We'll end that question there so we don't get too in the weeds. Where do you see the role of pelvic floor PT going? I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. Like, it kind of, the sky's the limit on this one. Again, I feel like there's opportunities to go into subspecialties even more. I think that's going to require a lot more education of the public. That's where, when I'm talking to clients, I'm like, hey, you know what, I can't come see you all the time, but I'd like to come. And I was like, you know what, start with your basic pelvic floor PT and then come to me for the specific run stuff that they don't know. Like, that's where I think kind of, understanding, you know, if your insurance benefits are like, hey, it's going to be like nothing out of pocket to go here, start the basics, but also know that they're going to get you the basics. They're not going to get you the sport specific stuff that's going to get you to that 50 miler leak free or something along those lines. I hope to see more of that. I think we've seen a lot in the barbell space and CrossFit. It cracks me up because, like, in 2013, like, I think you'd be shot dead in a CrossFit box if people knew you were a PT. Like, my first year in the gym that I used to go to,
I did not tell a single person for a year that I was a PT. I'm like, nope, I'm just gonna put my head down and learn. Um, and of course, now you've got PTs and CrossFit gyms and stuff all the time. So I think it's super funny. Um, so I hope to see more of that. I hope to see more people embracing telehealth, and I hope to see a national licensure. What I mean by that is the way licenses work for PTs, and this is just a bigger thing, is we're licensed by state. There's different requirements by state. We take a national exam, but then there's different state requirements, and so there is the National PT Licensure Compact. So, for example, West Virginia, I'm licensed in West Virginia. Rather than having to jump through a bunch of hoops, I think because Virginia is part of the compact, um, I can apply West Virginia. I pay a fee, do any extra legal stuff. So I know that there are laws, and boom, we're good to go. Um, I think we need to get more states involved in that compact so that, if I have a client in California who wants to work with me, I can easily get licensed in California or Oregon, or I'm just pulling that random. I can't remember if they're in the compact or not, but like to make it easier for people not to be limited by their geography for the PTs that they see. So I hope we see more of that. If you're interested in participating in that more, contact your state or national American Physical Therapy Association. And again, I hope I see more collaboration with other fields. I feel like there's been such a great relationship between coaches and trainers in the perinatal space. I hope that will continue to improve in other spaces as well, working with GYNs and hormones with perimenopause and menopause. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. It's kind of really going that direction now. So just more collaboration in other spaces. All right, next one. What has made the biggest impact in postpartum journey? A couple of things. The first one would be, so I started running after my first, maybe a little bit of leakage. We had a miscarriage in between, had my daughter, wasn't able to do a VBAC, had another C-section, was up to 200 pounds, and then slowly started to get back to running. I think the biggest changes for me were to recognize that there was going to be a path forward. And I don't know that at the time I knew what that would look like. And the steps that I took, like starting lifting and CrossFit, I think has been life altering for me, adding resistance training, not only for perinatal stuff, but 'cause we still didn't know that much about hip rehab when I had my FAI surgery almost 17 years ago. So I was still kind of navigating that. And again, now being in this space and being educated, getting moms active sooner. I'm really jealous that I didn't get a chance to do that. If I had to do it over again, I think I totally would have. But I feel like for me, I got there a little late, but I got there, and then all that I've learned there is really gonna, I think, keep me ahead in this, perimenopausal transition, because I'm already doing the weightlifting and that kind of stuff. I think other things in my postpartum journey are just the connectedness that comes with others who have experienced similar things as you, being able to speak to other moms that maybe had a plan and it didn't work out, and then you're questioning your identity. I think that was something that was really hard for me because, here I was this pelvic floor PT. And that's why I didn't talk about stuff for a long time. And it really was a conscious decision for me to go on social media and be like, yeah, you know what? I have navigated leakage. I have navigated prolapse, diastasis, pelvic girdle pain. Because ideally, wouldn't you think that if you were the expert, you could prevent all those things, and must be by process of logic or whatever, that because you had those things, you weren't able to prevent it, that makes you a shitty therapist. Like that was literally in my head. And I think the realization that that wasn't true, and understanding that there was so much that we have left to understand and learn. And I've done that from kind of an experiential level, because I've done that and had to problem solve that for myself. And I've been at those points where you question your capacity to get back or to do something that you want to do. Like, um, I think when you go through that process of being like, all right, am I willing to do what this takes? And I don't know if that was ever a question because I didn't know what it was going to take. It was just constantly, well, what about this? And what about this? And I got to be able to get better. There must be more. And I don't know when that question I'll stop asking that question because, I'm sitting here at 47 and running faster, running longer, running with less pain, lifting heavier, lifting better, performing better. Like, I know there's going to be an endpoint to it, but until that happens, like, it's such a beautiful freaking thing when you've been through all that to be like, I feel good in my body today. I'm taking a deep breath and it feels good. And my hip feels great. My back feels great. Or I just lifted heavy AF this morning and that's freaking awesome. Like those sorts of things. So I don't know when my time will be up and I start going downhill, but I'm sure as heck gonna be happy for what I have and the ride that I'm on and share the journey along the way. So I think that outlook, conscious or not, is probably in the rear view one of the most important things, that there I don't amongst the hopelessness, there was hope. So, all right. Last one that I have here, which is great because we're wrapping up around an hour here. Um, this one, I don't talk about this much. Balanced mom life and a biz owner. It is not balanced, not even remotely close. I think it's easier now because I've accepted some degree of the chaos. I have a dear friend, Cecily DeStefano, who says you're juggling, two types of balls. You have the glass ones and the rubber ones, and you can drop the rubber ones, but not the glass ones. And I think having a young family when I started my business, and just for perspective, the day I took the oath of office for presidency for the Academy of Pelvic Health. I'd been on the board for, I think, 4 years before that. 2 days later, I opened my practice with a full caseload. So I go big or I go home. I'm not afraid to do the work. I think as a business owner, for me to be able to do the work the way that I wanted to was such a motivation, and to work with people that I truly resonate with, and feel like I can help. And I think that was such, and again, like I'm really lucky that a good majority of my patients are moms and they have kids. And that was a conscious choice that, yeah, I can do all these different things in pelvic health, but I choose to work with the people that are going to understand. Um, and yeah, the conversations that we have can be like, oh my God, how did you navigate this phase of your life? And, having to survive the first couple years of the pandemic when everything was kind of shut down, that was a challenge as well. But again, having the flexibility so that I could navigate the kids, and they were still young, they were like 6 and 8. The first couple years of school, like that was not easy. I navigated as well. My husband would kill me if I didn't say thank you. We have figured out a work partnership and we get it done. But it's also with the understanding of I carry a lot of the weight as far as the kids stuff is concerned. I turn into a chauffeur about 3:30, and that goes until about 8, pretty much every night of the week. I am the chief project manager, schedule keeper for the house, and know where everybody's supposed to be and when. That's also my skill set, not his. Love you, honey. But there's a lot of stuff that he carries too. And again, it's a lot easier now because, the kids can be home alone for a little bit and they can wipe their butts and feed themselves and turn on their iPads and that kind of stuff. But with the flexibility comes, the question of the hustle. And I have the big conversations with, colleagues where my generation was the one that, we were sold Sheryl Sandberg and lean into it and you can do anything. And that's, what we were taught as girls growing up. Oh, you can do anything. No, you can, but do you choose to? So I think for me, it's also been a balance of, and again, it's not a balance. It's sometimes my family and, stuff's going on takes priority. Sometimes my kids and advocating for them and the stuff that they need takes priority. And fortunately, my business is such that, it can go on autopilot for a little while sometimes. And then sometimes my business takes, priority and I need to do a little bit more there. So it's kind of understanding that it's never someone's actively trying to throw a grenade at you at all times. And so it's your ability to adjust and be flexible and that was not me as a new mom. I was not flexible at all. It was like whatever you resist persists. If I couldn't, sit down for 25 minutes to do a straight yoga workout, it wasn't going to happen. And so that's where I do think that what I've learned as a mom has helped in business, because inevitably there's going to be a phone call from school to pick up some kid, or I'm going to forget something. And, you try and put as many safeguards in to make sure that the day goes well, but sometimes it doesn't, and you roll with it. And as long as everybody's healthy, and safe and happy as much as possible, then it's a win. So, no, there is no balance. Even when your kids get older, because again, you got emotions and puberty and schoolwork and whatever the heck math they're teaching in, middle school. So anyway, again, that could be a whole other podcast. I guess, that wraps up the 100th episode. We might be doing more of these solo episodes. So if you have thoughts on things that you would like to hear me talk more about, we hit a lot of things in this episode. So things you want me to dive a little bit deeper on, happy to do that. Apparently I can talk to myself for an hour, so that's good. Good news, bad news. But it has been an absolute freaking pleasure, honor, privilege, and just a gift to be able to do this podcast and to talk to so many people and hear their stories and share their stories and hopefully make an impact on someone somewhere on this planet, that they feel like they're not alone, or they have hope, or there's somebody that had a similar experience to them, or they learned something or motivated them to try something new or to learn something new, because that's what it's all about. And one of these days, I'm not going to be doing this for work anymore. And when you look back and say, what did I give back in return? Hopefully, hopefully this is just one of those things. So if you've listened this long, thank you. If you have questions, you can always hop in, DM me at Carrie Pagliano on Instagram. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to those of you who have listened. I think by the time this runs, we'll be over 40,000 downloads, which is pretty freaking cool. Thank you to all of our guests. Thank you to those who gave suggestions of guests and those guests to come. Thank you. It is just an absolute honor. And we'll see you next time, maybe with a guest, maybe not.
Did you enjoy the podcast? If so, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and tell a friend to do the same. Are you a postpartum mom or postpartum pro wanting to know more about getting back to running after baby? Check out all my free goodies on carriepagliano.com. This podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Carrie Pagliano and her guests to the show. The content should not be taken as medical advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Always consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.